that if such an operation actually happened, okay, and I don't believe it, but if it happened, then Ajit may have been in the know of it, but I can assure you he's far too savvy to be involved in any such botched operation.
Tell me this, if Ajit Doval knew of it and still allowed it to happen and go ahead, does that also mean he approved of it?
No, not necessarily. No. You know, sometimes in the hierarchy that we work under, sometimes you get to know of things you may not approve of. But if it has happened, then you just watch it.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. How would someone who spent an entire career in the Indian intelligence service view the Washington Post story alleging an attempt was made on the life of Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, the Khalistan militant leader who is an American citizen living in America, and that it was allegedly ordered by an official working for India's intelligence agency RAW based in New Delhi? That's the key issue I shall discuss today with the former chief of RAW, Amarjit Singh Dulat. Mr. Dulat, let me start with a simple question. What's your overall opinion of the Washington Post story on the alleged assassination attempt against Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, allegedly ordered by Indian officials? What's your assessment of that story?
Mr. Thapar, we've been through this before, but let me say that as a former head of the organization and somebody who I think, I hope I know a little bit, I would prima facie have reservations about the allegations made in this article in the Washington Post. You know, because we've not been involved in this kind of activity. I don't think we are still involved in this sort of thing. Also, I would like to believe that the R&AW is not as sloppy as it's been made out to be.
What about the fact that we need to find out the truth? Do you believe the government must investigate and inquire and find out the truth?
Oh, absolutely. I think about 6 weeks ago, I saw an interview of the Prime Minister in the FT, in which he said that if the Americans have evidence and it's provided to us, we will certainly look into it and inquire into it. Because he said this is an important relationship and it should not be spoiled by whatever is happening now, all these allegations.
As a former head of RAW, what is your personal belief? Do you believe it is important for the organization to find out the truth of these allegations?
Absolutely, yeah, of course.
So you say, as a former head of RAW, an inquiry is essential?
Yeah, I think the government is looking into it. That's the impression one keeps.
No, whatever the government may be doing is another matter. Whatever the government is doing is another matter. What is your opinion as a former head of RAW? Do you believe an inquiry to establish the truth is essential?
Yeah, if there is evidence, it is essential. Of course, it's essential.
Now, the Post has identified the alleged mastermind, previously referred to in the superseding indictment as CC1, as a CRPF officer on secondment to RAW called Vikram Yadav. First of all, tell me, how common are such secondments from the CRPF to RAW?
Well, secondments are pretty common in the R&AW. We have officers from everywhere. This is one of the weaknesses of the organization, I used to think. And so that's not surprising. The important thing here is because if Vikram Yadav is CC1 and he's involved in some kind of thing, then the question which arises is that how long has he been with the R&AW? And what does he know about operational matters? So, firstly, whether there is such an issue or not, and then secondly, whether, how long has this gentleman been or was in the R&AW? I think these are crucial matters.
According to the Post, Vikram Yadav, and I'm quoting the paper, lacked training and skills, and as a result of that, the operation was botched. Would you accept that it seems rather was the wrong man for this job, and choosing him suggests poor judgment on the part of his bosses?
That's why I said at the very outset that I would not like to believe that the R&AW is so sloppy. And if it's a botched operation, all I can say is it's very sad.
It's very sad if it was a botched operation.
Obviously.
Does this reflect badly on R&AW?
Yeah, it would. I mean, if it was such a sloppy operation, if there was an operation at all, as I said, I have reservations about it because we've never been involved in this kind of thing.
But what you're saying is if there was such an operation and it was botched as badly as this operation was botched, it would have an adverse impact on R&AW's reputation.
Yeah, it reflects badly on the organization for sure, yeah.
Reflects badly on the organization. Those are your precise words.
Yeah, I don't take back my words. Yeah, it's okay.
Now, the next question is, was this a rogue operation or was it officially sanctioned? The Post newspaper says, and I'm quoting the paper, US intelligence agencies have assessed that the operation targeting Pannun was approved by the RAW chief at the time, Samant Goel. As one of his predecessors, how do you respond to that?
You see, I don't think the US security establishment has yet provided evidence against Samant Goel. Incidentally, you might be surprised to know that Samant came to the organization under my watch, and he was rated very highly by his police chief in the Punjab. And I have been watching his growth right to the top. So unless there is evidence, I would rather not believe it.
Let me put it like this. Could Vikram Yadav have undertaken such an operation without clearance from the top?
Of course not. But whether the smoking gun or whatever it is points to Samant, I don't know if the Americans have any evidence.
Well, the Americans may not have evidence, but can I put it like this? Could Yadav have undertaken such an operation without specific clearance from his bosses?
Of course not, but the point is, if they have evidence, then it should be provided. And if it is provided, then I'm sure action will be taken on that. I think that has been the stand of the government of India.
But you agree with me that it would be impossible to believe that Yadav, if he did this operation, did it without clearance from his bosses. He must have had clearance.
Yeah, you are right. But bosses is a very vague term, who are the bosses? So that's why, when you came to Samant, and I happen to know Samant, so I would say that there should be evidence against him.
We'll come to evidence later. We don't know whether there is or not. Remember, this is a newspaper report. We don't know whether there is evidence or not as yet. So let's park the evidence question on one side. Let me ask you this. Could such an operation have been authorized by a middle-level boss of Yadav? Or would it have had to be authorized by the head of RAW, which is Samant?
No, if there was, now this is a difficult question, but let me put it like this, that if somebody has gone and botched up an operation, it's not necessary that it was authorized from the top. I would not like to believe that the R&AW chief would order an operation which would be so obviously botched.
But you're seriously saying to me that an operation that entails illegally killing, assassinating a foreign citizen on foreign soil could be authorized by someone other than the head of RAW?
No. We've never been involved in assassinations.
No.
And I
You're
don't
missing my
believe in
question.
that.
No. You're
No.
missing my question. Please hear my question,
No,
Mr. Dulat. Mr. Dulat,
I'm
hear my
listening to you.
question. Are you
I'll listen.
telling me, Mr. Dulat, hear my question. Are you telling me that an operation to kill a foreign citizen on foreign soil, if it had been sanctioned, could be sanctioned by someone other than the chief of RAW, that i.e. a middle level boss could have sanctioned such an operation? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, theoretically, Mr. Thapar, I'll go along with you. But you're not listening to me that these things don't happen, and we have never authorized such killing. Nor have they happened in the past, and nor do I believe they've happened now.
How do you know they haven't happened now? What confidence with which can you tell me that it hasn't happened? It is, after all, almost 25 years since you left RAW. So how do you know
Yeah,
what's happening today?
of course it is. A lot of things have changed. I agree. I acknowledge that. But the point is, the Canadians had said something. Now the Americans are saying something. And the Americans are much better at all this. Why don't they provide the evidence?
Let me ask you a second question.
Okay.
The Washington Post, quoting US intelligence, is convinced that Samant Goel knew and gave clearance. You have doubts about it, but the Washington Post, quoting US intelligence, is convinced of it. The key question now that remains to be answered is how much further up the chain of command were people aware of what was planned? The Post says, and I'm quoting the paper, CIA analysts have assessed that Doval, that's India's national security advisor, probably knew of or approved Raw's plans to kill Sikhs his government considered terrorists. Now, you know Ajit Doval extremely well. He's a
I
friend
do.
of yours.
He is.
Could such a thing have been planned without his knowledge or approval?
Now, all this is very theoretical, Mr. Thapar. But let me say that if such an operation actually happened, okay, and I don't believe it, but if it happened, then Ajit may have been in the know of it, but I can assure you he's far too savvy to be involved in any such botched operation. And I think this is something. I was listening to that interview of Markey with you, and one of the things he conceded or acknowledged was that in the US security establishment, they have the highest regard for Ajit Doval for his professional capabilities. So that's what I'm trying to stress on.
Can I repeat your precise words back to you and ask you what you mean by them? You said, and I'm quoting you, if it happened, Ajit may have been in the know of it.
Know of it, yeah.
What does being in the know of it mean?
Means that, if such a thing was happening and it was brought to his knowledge, yeah, he might have known about it. What happened thereafter, I wouldn't know. And there's no way that I could know. But what I'm trying to tell you, Mr. Thapar, is that Ajit Doval is far too savvy, far too smart, far too good as a professional officer to be involved in a botched this kind of operation.
Tell me something. If
And you
Ajit
say, I know Ajit, I do know Ajit.
Tell me this, if Ajit Doval knew of it and still allowed it to happen and go ahead, does that also mean he approved of it?
No, not necessarily. No. Sometimes in the hierarchy that we work under, sometimes you get to know of things. You may not approve of it. But if it has happened, then you just watch it.
So you're saying to me it's possible Ajit Doval knew of it, but did not
May have
approve of it.
Yeah,
But did not approve of it.
Again, Mr. Thapar, I come back to the same thing. Theoretically, yes. If it happened, Ajit may have known of it or should have known of it. But he would never have been involved in it. Let me put it now. I think I've made myself clear.
Now, both Doval as NSA and Goel as RAW chief would have had direct access to Prime Minister Modi. Could they have planned or at least even known of an operation to kill an American citizen on American soil without informing the Prime Minister, or at least without making sure the Prime Minister would approve?
I don't know how the system works today, and I would not like to comment on what the Prime Minister knows or doesn't know. No, I won't go to that level. I think let's skip the Prime Minister in this.
Let me ask you one last question.
I don't know the Prime Minister. Let me put it to you very, very plainly. And I don't know how the system functions today.
Tell me, is it the fact that you don't know Mr. Modi personally that once leads you to want to skip this? Is that the reason?
No, I don't know Mr. Modi personally, and I would not like to cast any kind of aspersion on a Prime Minister of India. Let me put it like that. Let's leave it at that.
Let me quote to you what the Post newspaper says of the Prime Minister. That is a published document. US Western security officials said it's unlikely that RAW would have launched such operations without a clear understanding that doing so would be met with approval by the Prime Minister. In other words, both US and Western security officials believe RAW would not have done this without a clear understanding that the Prime Minister would approve of it.
But this is what the Washington Post is saying, not what the US security establishment is saying.
No, but hang on, forgive me. The Post is
security advisor of the United States of India were to say that, then it would hold a lot more substance in it, But if it is just an article in the Washington Post or wherever, I don't necessarily buy it. I don't have to buy it. Yeah.
I should point out that the Washington Post is saying that US and Western security officials have said this. It's not the Post's opinion. It's unnamed Western and US security officials who said it to the Post.
Yeah, that's right. Now I'm talking to you, and tomorrow somebody might quote me, but the point is that, what newspapers put out is not always accurate. It's not, you get it from sources that you don't talk about, or those sources don't want to be quoted. So why don't you quote those sources? Why don't those quoted sources talk directly to the government of India?
Because of the reason you just cited. They don't want to be quoted. They prefer the protection of anonymity.
So there we are. So then who knows what's right and what's wrong? How much of it is true and how much of it is not? And that's where I began. That prima facie, I have reservations.
But are you suggesting that the Washington Post has made up these stories?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm not suggesting that. But you get a scoop from somewhere, and then you get carried away, and you build on a story, and it gets exaggerated.
Okay.
I'm saying, Mr. Thapar, I'm not backtracking from what I've said. What I've said about Samant, what I've said about the R&AW, and what I said about Ajit Doval, I'll stand by that.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Let's move a little further, Mr. Dulat. It's not just the United States that has expressed concerns about RAW. The Post
Yeah.
newspaper reveals that in Australia, Germany, and Britain, there have been what the paper calls clashes between raw and domestic security services. The Post says raw officers and agents have faced arrest, expulsion, and reprimand. And in Australia, the Sydney Morning Herald and ABC News have reported that a nest of Indian spies was expelled 4 years ago. Do you, as a former chief of RAW, accept that RAW has been involved in all these countries in the way that is suggested?
No, 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 no. What would we be doing in Australia with a nest of spies? No, no, not at all. Australia is very low in our activities. Let me put it like that.
So you believe a story?
I mean, this gives me the feeling this is Ford coming back to repay us.
That phrase, a nest of spies, was used by the Director General of ASIO, the Australian Intelligence Agency. The papers are simply in Australia quoting him. Are you saying he's lying?
Mr. Thapar, why has he woken up 4 years late? If it was happening 4 years ago, this matter should have been brought to light and the complaint should have been lodged with Government of India and with our National Security Advisor, whatever it is. Now, I don't think anybody is going to take that report seriously. The American report, I can assure you, will be taken seriously, and our Prime Minister has said so. As I told you, I saw an interview of his in the Financial Times about 6 weeks ago.
Just on the Australian story,
Yeah.
the nest of spies was expelled 4 years ago. It may well have been taken up by the Australians with the Indian authorities at the time. It's only that they're revealing it publicly now. The fact that they've chosen to reveal it 4 years after it's happened doesn't necessarily make it untrue.
Mr. Thapar, as a former head of the organization, you make it very awkward for me. But we keep coming back to the same thing that, these stories are good stories. They're good spy stories. But we need evidence, There has to be evidence.
In other words, you're not satisfied by the fact that the Director General of ASIO, the Australian agency, actually said this to the Australian papers. That is not good enough for you.
No, it would have been good enough for me if I was head of R&AW and he said it to me, and then we would have quietly inquired into the matter.
In the British case, the Washington Post says that in 2014-2015, when Samant Goyal incidentally was RAW station chief in London, Britain's domestic security services delivered warnings to Goyal. Jerry Shee, the Washington Post chief of bureau in India, has told me this happened on many occasions, not just once, but multiple occasions. And Jerry Shee also says that Britain even considered expelling Goyal. Now, as a former head of R&AW, how do you respond to that?
No, very straight, very simple. If there was such allegation, then if the British intelligence was not happy with him, he should have been sent home, declared persona non grata. It happens quite often. It would not have been a unique case. But normally, among friendly intelligence services, a person is quietly warned, he's told, and then he behaves himself. So obviously, if there was something that the Brits didn't like that Samant was doing, and he may have been sounded, and that was the end.
So you're saying this is not an exceptional story? This sort of thing happens quite often?
It happens all over the world, yes. You see, what is not coming, what is not in the public domain at all is that the number of American officers who've been sent home from here, the CIA, not in recent times, but in my time, I spent 7 years doing counterintelligence in the Intelligence Bureau. And I can tell you that a number of CIA officers were sent home, quietly told, go back.
You're saying something very significant. You're saying during the 7 years you were in charge of counterintelligence in the Intelligence Bureau. This time we're talking of the Intelligence Bureau, not RAW. Several American CIA officials were sent back home. In other words, declared persona non grata.
Yes, yes, not only CIA, in those days, the KGB, Pakistanis very often, and possibly the odd Chinese as well.
Finally,
And I can tell you the Brits were also sounded from time to time. So these are not unique stories, you know.
Finally, the Washington Post says again, and I'm quoting the paper, a wave of violence occurred in Pakistan, where at least 11 Sikh or Kashmiri separatists living in exile and labeled terrorists by the Modi government have been killed over the last 2 years. Jay Shi, the Washington Post chief of bureau, tells me that the finger of suspicion points at India. As a former head of RAW, how do you respond to that?
You know, I'm a well-wisher of Pakistan, and you know that. But Pakistan has been in such a mess that there are killings all the time, all over the place. And even if we go back to some of the, you know, some of the big killings in Pakistan, for instance, Benazir Bhutto's assassination, or even President Zia's assassination, we still don't know who the killers were. So these things keep happening. And for the Pakistanis to complain against us, I think is in some ways hilarious, because they do this all the time in Kashmir, you know, or they have been doing this all the time in Kashmir, and we never did it. As I told you before, it would have been very easy for us to, you know, Gilani Saab, who was Pakistan's last man standing in Kashmir, to just roll him down the jail. But we never did these things. That's why I keep stressing on that we don't do these things.
Can I put it like this? What Jerry Shea and the Washington Post are referring to is perhaps also a story done very recently by the British newspaper The Guardian. And speaking from memory, I believe The Guardian said something like 20 people in Pakistan had been killed in mysterious circumstances. And The Guardian suggested that the finger of suspicion was pointing at India. And that story emerged in all of 3 or 4 or 5 weeks ago. So it's not an old story. It's a fairly relatively new story, not just by the Washington Post, but by the Guardian as well.
I'm not suggesting it's an old story. What I'm saying is that, you know, if you look at what's happening in Pakistan, and I feel sad for Pakistan, that these killings keep happening all over the place, you know. So to blame us for those killings, I don't know. I have no idea.
Finally, my last question, Mr. Dulat. Does everything that I've raised or suggested in this interview give you the feeling that there is the influence of the Israeli agency Mossad at work? In other words, do you get the feeling RAW is either influenced by Mossad or at least is following Mossad's own example?
No. We don't need anybody's example. The R&AW is a very professional organization. And then, you know, I would have to ask you a counter question. Which Mossad are we talking about? Netanyahu or Ephraim Halevi, my counterpart? Halevi used to tell me that Hamas can neither be blown away nor wished away, and we need to engage with Mossad. Now, more recently, very recently, the Mossad chief has resigned. He has resigned because he has demanded an inquiry into what happened on the 7th of October. So which Mossad are we talking about?
I'll tell you which Mossad we're talking about.
Is it Professor Mossad or Netanyahu?
I'll answer that question. We're talking about the Mossad, which after the Munich killings during the Munich Olympics of 1972 actually undertook the assassins. But let me finish. And ended up killing people, I'm saying this from memory, in Norway, in Rome, in Paris, and possibly Tunis. That is the Mossad I'm talking about. It's a well-known aspect and feature of Mossad that when they cannot bring to justice legally, they do it in this way.
Well, thankfully, Mr. Thapar, the Mossad that I knew was Ephraim Halevi. He was my counterpart in those days. And I think you interviewed him more recently. And he was very clear that engagement was the only way forward. And there, he and I have always agreed.
So the belief that the Indian agency RAW has taken a leaf out of Mossad's book, you're telling me is untrue.
No, we don't need any leaves.
Mr. Dulat, thank you very much for talking to me. I deeply appreciate the fact that even as a former head of RAW, you were prepared to answer questions that raise serious doubts about how RAW has behaved. You don't necessarily want to believe that the story published in the Post is true, but you do say that an inquiry is essential in the interests of RAW itself. And you have also said
that inquiry is essential because we've said we'll do an inquiry, we'll look into the matter. When the Prime Minister says this, I don't think I have to say anything more than that.
Except that you did say that. You said an inquiry is essential, and you also
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
and you
Okay.
also said, I'm quoting you, you also said, if it happened, Ajit Doval may have been in the know of it, but you added that does not necessarily mean he approved of it.
No, I said he may have been in the know of it if there was any such operation.
Absolutely. That was also my precise words.
Involved in such a thing. Okay.
Mr. Dulat, thank you very much for talking to me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks, Mr. Thapar.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.